Good afternoon, and welcome to a special edition of the OBX Wave Report, where we're going to dive into what the climate scientists are chatting about today. I've got a selection of climate scientists here for you. One of them is a known surfer, and what this special edition of the OBX Wave Report, the reason why we're doing this is we want to focus on promoting climate science messaging and lifting up the voices of climate scientists, amplifying the voices of climate scientists. And the reason why we're doing this is because at the OBX Wave Report, we're on a mission to do our best to save the coastlines from the impacts of human-caused climate change driven by fossil fuel burning. And step one in that process is to listen to the experts and hear what the experts are saying. The signal coming from the experts is important to understand, to process, and to do so in a rational, measured fashion without, going nuts and lighting our hair on fire. When we surfers see a big wave coming at us, we don't freak out. We don't just flail our arms. We do what we need to do. We position ourselves to avoid the worst impact of the wave. We duck dive to try and get underneath the wave. If we have to, we'll ditch the board and go swim to the bottom and grab the sandbar or the reef. Um, if we freak out, we're just going to end up getting the beat down. So, and we also listen to the surf gurus and experts that know how to deal with those kinds of situations that can give us information and expertise that they can pass on to us. Um, and here on the interwebs, we are very lucky because we have a number of surf gurus that can give us advice. Like Cal Brock is one of my favorites, Nathan Florence, and a number of professional surfers who've gotten on the YouTubes to give us some great advice about surfing and what we can do to improve our skill in the sport that we so love as we interact with the natural world and the waves. But if we're looking at saving our coastlines, we need to shift our focus on to the other gurus, and the other gurus are the climate scientists and the expert organizations that spend their daily lives looking at the Earth system and its life supports and the health of that system and where it's trending, and then providing us with good information on what we can do as more fossil fuels have been injected into the climate system. So, yeah, I mean, we're on the coast, we're riding the waves, we're enjoying the coast, and also we're coming under the gun. And I mean, we as surfers, we're right there on the edge of climate change, whether you realize it or not. So listen to the scientists. Let's pay attention to the scientists. We're going to do that today. We're going to look at the social media feeds of scientists. We're going to amplify the information and enlightenment coming out of the climate science. And the first climate scientist that we're going to look at is a favorite of mine, Dr. Jennifer Francis. Her revolutionary research on the jet stream has provided a lot of insight into the climate system, groundbreaking research that is still being refined in the climate science today. And what is Dr. Jennifer Francis tweeting about? Well, lo and behold, we have a climate scientist. I say this with a bit of tongue-in-cheek humor. Pretty much most of the climate scientists are out there promoting clean energy, and Dr. Jennifer Francis is not an exception. She's out here retweeting a tweet from All Your Tech from January 21st and says, if electric cars were first to mass market and someone made an ICE car, a regular internal combustion engine car, one of the ones that uses fossil fuels and spews all the nasty stuff into the air, we would all be laughing about the unnecessarily complex engine, the constant maintenance required to keep it running, the laughingly slow acceleration, and the need to drive somewhere to refuel. And wow, this is a great tweet. I mean, I was out there driving Uber yesterday, and a bunch of Fisher dudes got in the car, and they were like, "Wow, Tesla! I've never ridden a Tesla before." And We got out onto the Baum Bridge out here out in Manio, and I just put the accelerator down like halfway. I didn't give it all the juice, but I mean, it just gave that famous Tesla gravity, that famous electric vehicle gravity, like you feel the G's as you accelerate, and they were all like, "Whoa!" And I and I was like, I mean, I wasn't even like just I mean, really slamming it down. I was just, just giving them a little juice, just to let them feel the acceleration. You see the, numbers just go, from like 0 to 60 in like, a few seconds, 3 to 4 seconds. And that's just something that you can only get that instant torque from an electric vehicle. But, the fun of that and the amazing responsiveness of um, that really just allows you to dial in your speed on the road with a combination of the acceleration and the regenerative braking. You're just one pedal driving. It's amazing. I feel like I'm like in a rocket and I'm just psh, 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 doing my attitude adjusters. And I mean, it's funny because though there's so much speed, it feels like a much safer speed because you can immediately control it by just pulling off the accelerator. Whereas with an electric vehicle, with an internal combustion engine clunker thing, you've got to take your foot off the accelerator, move it to that nasty old brake, which, puts pads on your, wheel and, does all the friction grindy things, which are, costly and expensive. And I mean, that's just one example. I mean, you're not breathing the nasty fumes and you're not paying for the crazy maintenance. Sure, the battery costs a lot of money to replace, but, I mean, you don't have an alternator, you don't have all your different, fluids, you don't have, the silly oil change, you don't have a radiator, you don't have, all the little doohickeys that they just bloop, 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 like just stack onto this nasty, you know, this weird, infernal device, called the internal combustion engine that's going to spit out all that pollution. You don't have to put a, catalytic converter or muffler on the end of it. It's all this crud, just bolted onto the car. You've just got this, nice battery and you got an electric motor and you got some magnets and you do have a brake that you use occasionally, but for the most part, you use the regenerative braking, or if you drive like me, for the most part, you use the regenerative braking. I've driven 70,000 miles and not replaced my brake pads, for example. I mean, there's just so many things. And yeah, yeah, okay, I know I'm going off, but this is like climate science chat. What are climate scientists talking about? My car out here is right here refueling at my house. I mean, the only time I need to go to a station is when I go on a long trip or I drive a long time with Uber. And um, like for your daily driving, all you have to do is just go home. And everyone's like, oh, you got to plug. And I'm just like, duh. I mean, okay, I plug in my phone, I plug in my computer. What's so hard about plugging in your car? It's just boop, boop, done. I mean, how much time do you spend fiddling around with like a nasty gas pump? And besides, what kind of like chemicals are you inhaling that eat your freaking brain when you pump that gas? So yeah, we could go on and on and on, and Jennifer Francis gets it. And you know what? The reason why I get it is because the scientists got it first. I got my information from people like Dr. Jennifer Francis and the IPCC scientists and all those great scientists over at Real Climate. And so, yeah, yeah, I mean, listen to the scientists. This is what Jennifer Francis is tweeting about. She's a scientist, she's an expert, she's a good person. And yeah, let's amplify that. Let's amplify her messaging here. And then the other tweet that I wanted to show you about, or show you that Dr. Jennifer Francis is talking about is she's promoting a new podcast and NPR's Living on the Earth, and an episode discussing recent extreme weather events. And it's just like, the climate scientists, they're like, hey, there's this extreme weather, there's this climate fingerprint, there's these clean energy things that we can do to solve the problem. It's just there. It's like there in the climate science chatter. Follow Jennifer Francis. She's amazing. We love Jennifer Francis. Last tweet I'm going to highlight from Dr. Jennifer Francis is poking criticism at the oil industry, much deserved criticism because of way back in the way back machine, back in the 1960s and 70s, the fossil fuel industry did all this research into climate change and they found, oh boy, the Earth's going to warm up. Wow, we better do things like raise our oil platforms because of sea level rise. But you know what? Let's not tell the public about it. And yeah, so also highlighting a tweet from Peter Kalmus. I can't believe we still haven't ended government subsidies for the fossil fuel industry following yet another revelation that Exxon made breathtakingly accurate climate predictions in the 1970s and 80s, and then drove some of driving some of the leading science on understanding climate, and then publicly poo-pooed basically what their own scientific research was saying. All right, so let's move on to our next climate scientist, climate researcher, Arctic expert, polar expert, Zach Labe, who is a fantastic polar observer. And oh, he follows me. Wow, I didn't realize that Zach Labe follows me. Yay, Zach Labe, you're awesome, dude. But no need to follow me because I follow you and you got the good stuff. And so in any case, Zach Labe is out here talking a lot about extreme temperatures. And another year with his most recent tweet 2 hours ago, another year with the same climate story surprise. Red shading shows warmer than average temperatures. Overall, the global average temperature in 22 was 0.89 degrees Celsius above the 1951 to 1980 baseline, or 1.6 degrees Fahrenheit. That's really kind of getting freaky. If you look at 1880s ranges, this is in the, I believe, like 1.1 degrees Celsius departure range. In any case, getting into that range where things get a little freaky for the climate as we've been seeing. And let's see, it says, oh yeah, and then here we go. He answered my question as I should have just read the whole tweet. Okay, and or 1.16C above 1880 through 1920, which I was just trying to do the math for, but he provided for me. Let's just look at this graphic that he provides. Zach Labe has amazing graphics, and this is for these are the global temperature anomalies for 2022. And you can see here from the bottom of the graph the range between cold and warm. And you look at the poles. One of the things we get with climate change is this thing called polar amplification, where the colder, darker regions of the world tend to warm up fastest as the greenhouse gases spread heat more evenly around the globe. And then there's also these various like teleconnection type influences apparently that Dr. Francis for one talks about about how you can get these big ridges in the jet stream that pump heat into the Arctic. So you got this general global sense in a sense of like how air masses move when the climate changes. But looking at temperatures in 22, we had these really crazy extreme temperature departures at the poles, particularly in the northwestern Russia, Siberia area, and also down here into the Southern Ocean near Antarctica. And we're going to get a little bit more into Antarctica as we go down Zach Labe's Twitter feed to see what he's chatting about. Um, his next post is this comparison showing the latest observations in carbon dioxide and methane. Carbon dioxide and methane are the major greenhouse gases that are affecting the climate. There are various other trace gases that do trap heat in the atmosphere, but the big boys, the big gorillas in the room, if you will, or the Godzillas in the room, if you will, are the biggest one is carbon dioxide. It's the biggest long-term one, and then quickly following that is methane. Methane is traps a lot more heat by volume than carbon dioxide, but it has a shorter lifespan in the atmosphere. And the hope for climate scientists and us living on the earth, for a stable climate is that we can, both tamp down carbon dioxide emissions to get to net zero and eventually net negative, but also tamp down the methane emissions, because if you can contain the methane emissions and reduce the methane emissions from the human sources, namely fossil fuel extraction sources, then the overabundance of methane in the atmosphere due to its short life just just evaporates. It goes away more rapidly, um, unless you get this really nasty amplifying feedback kind of situation in the climate system. But according to climate science, we can avoid that. We can stop the problem before it gets worse and before it compounds, and that methane will just wash out over a relatively short period of time and get broken down into other things in the atmosphere, and then you don't have as much heat forcing, and you get this nice reduction in the radiative forcing, and then and the longer term global warming through the climate system due to these big boys. But yeah, so carbon dioxide is Godzilla number one, and methane is Godzilla number two when it comes to climate system. And right now, Zach Labe pointing out here the present carbon dioxide at 419 parts per million. That's not good at all. And then present methane at 1916 parts per million. So also milestones where we don't want to be. Climate scientists earlier in the century indicated that the safe range for carbon dioxide is likely in the range of 350 parts per million or less. And we are well over that. Methane is also well above ranges typically seen in recent geological epochs. So yeah. All right, looking at more of Zach Labe tweeting here, we're talking about oceans now, and other climate scientists have talked a lot about oceans. Zach Labe, in case you missed it, 2022 was the hottest year on record for our oceans. We are tired of saying this every year. And this is what happens. I mean, the Earth climate system heats up, a lot of the heat ends up in the oceans, and you end up with record ocean heat content. Um, there's like a natural cycle between El Nino and La Nina. We've also been in a La Nina state. La Nina tends to be the cooler cycle for the atmosphere, but it also tends to draw more heat into the ocean. Um, so yeah, so Zach Labe talking about that as well. And then for our last tweet that we're going to look at from Zach Labe, we're going to talk about Antarctic sea ice. And I didn't realize this. This is kind of a new thing for me. But apparently the Antarctic sea ice, Antarctic being the South Pole, so Arctic North, Antarctic South. Okay, so the Antarctic sea ice, this is the ice that surrounds Antarctica in the ocean, the ice that sits on the ocean. Um, that is at a new parent record low for this summertime because, in the southern hemisphere, it's summer now, and in the northern hemisphere it's winter, so you get that reverse as the tilt of the earth changes in relationship to the sun. And so yeah, Antarctica is right now in the summertime seeing record low sea ice, and this is something that I did not know. This is new news for me. There's probably going to be some news about this. I would definitely follow Zach Labe and the other climate scientists to see what scientists and particularly polar researchers have to say about this. But there should also be an interesting news discussion. Worth noting that the National Snow and Ice Data Center is also a major informer when it comes to Arctic and Antarctic sea ice conditions. So yeah, record low sea ice, that is a climate indicator, major climate indicator, big time, not good. Okay, so moving on to our next climate scientist, I'm going to talk about this guy, Stefan Ramsdorf, really amazing, cutting edge kind of researcher. Some of the stuff he says kind of scares me. um, but yeah, I mean, like in the I need to be alert, scared kind of way. Very sharp, very direct, cutting edge research specifically on ocean currents, ocean overturning circulation, and the Gulf Stream. And Stefan Ramsdorf is also a surfer. So he's out there in the waves. He's got that connection that we do as surfers as well. And what is Stefan Ramsdorf talking about today? Let's see, talking about an OECD report on climate tipping points. Stefan does a lot of talk about tipping points in the climate systems, tipping points are if you provide enough forcing to the climate system trips into different states. And there's a word that we've used a lot called new normal. Um, and that can be indicative of a climate tipping point having been reached that changes the prevailing conditions in a certain region or in a part of the world. Sometimes tipping points can also create various feedbacks in the Earth system that might cascade. Tipping point is one of those kind of scary things. From a threat standpoint, you don't really want to hit the tipping points. If you want to learn about tipping points, check out this YouTube that is being tweeted by Stefan Ramsdorf on climate tipping points. All right, let's see some other statements by Stefan Ramsdorf talking about climate change denier. Um, Apparently there's multiple stages of climate change denial. I'm not sure like if the research is out on what all the official stages are, but it's definitely a mental condition that affects a lot of people when confronted with climate change. Some folks confronted with climate change do have a understandable reaction to it because it can be a little bit scary. Others seem to be climate change deniers purely for selfish or political purposes. I'm not certain with regards to what's the source of this individual's climate change denial, but Stefan Remsdorf providing his own expert diagnosis, stating that this is stage 3 of climate change denial. At least he's past stages 1, it's not warming, and stages 2, it's not caused by us. Now he needs to learn about increasing drought, fires, and ecosystem collapse as we move into a climate the biosphere is not adapted to, which is a huge problem for humanity. So I guess stage 3 of climate change denial is it's not so bad if it happens. In all honesty, you don't want to keep pushing the climate system. It's like a ratchet. It get like you got it impacts now, but as more heat gets injected, the ratchet turns and it gets tighter and it's more painful. And it just gets worse. And you don't want to do that. You want to do all the good things like get into your clean energy and rapidly respond to climate change and get to net zero and net negative carbon emissions and the sustainability, because that's just a prosperous world. And then the world of just turning away and continue to burn the nasty fossil fuels is not. um yeah, I think that's all I have to say about that. Stefan Ramsdorf retweeting Elizabeth Colbert, fantastic climate writer. You know what, I'm pretty sure I follow Elizabeth Colbert, but let's just make sure that I do. Oh, no, I do not. Oh, shame on me. Okay, I'm following Elizabeth Colbert now, and I am going to like this tweet by Elizabeth Colbert. And there has been a lot of chit chat about phytoplankton. It's interesting. We had a recent comment in one of our YouTube's video blogs on phytoplankton, and I had to clarify it. We have seen a 10% apparent reduction in the amount, the volume, I believe it was, of phytoplankton. I read an MIT study, and I might be misquoting it. So check with Elizabeth Colbert and MIT for like the most recent facts. But I believe we had about a 10% reduction in the volume of phytoplankton since the start of the Industrial Revolution. And phytoplankton are a big part of the food web here on Earth, a key indicator of the health of life on Earth. And if the phytoplankton are getting hit, then it's not it's not a good thing. It's something that we need to correct. It's something, and we can correct it. I don't like this can't do attitude that comes from people. We can correct it. Let's not look at a difficult thing and say, oh, we can't do it. Ooh, woe is me. Let's do it. We've got the solutions. We've got the innovation. We've got the innovative capacity. We can do this. But yes, so Stefan Ramsdorf retweeting Elizabeth Colbert, you know we're in trouble when phytoplankton numbers are plummeting. And okay, also retweeting Zach Labe, which we just talked about. And then this is really cool here. A tweet by Chris, oh God, I hope I'm not going to butcher this, Carnazzo. Karnauskas, climate scientist leading the Oceans and Climate Lab at CU Boulder, professor of CU Boulder and series news editor of the AGU, GRL, and um, PLOS Science. I am following Chris. Yay. And yeah, interesting quote about this, or just graphic. This is a graphic about the jet stream. It's like an infographic talking about how the jet stream can work and Rossby waves and teleconnections, and like how the jet stream creates like interesting connections between different regions of the world, like north and south and east and west. And here it's, picturing a high pressure system out in the center of the Pacific, and these different pressure gradients here, and teleconnections between here in the Arctic Circle, for example, and the central North Pacific, and yes, and then back up toward the Arctic here. I learned about teleconnections and Rossby waves by reading research by people like Chris and Dr. Jennifer Francis, which I mentioned earlier. And over here at NOAA.gov, which Chris is providing a link to here in his infographic, does provide information about teleconnections and the jet stream and Rossby waves. So if you want to learn more about how the jet stream works in a changing climate system, go to NOAA and listen to researchers like Chris. All right, so that's a nice roundup of what Stefan Ramstorff is talking about. I would love to go surfing with Stefan Ramstorff one of these days. That would just be really cool. In any case, all right, we're talking experts, and you know what? We don't just have expert individuals, we've got expert organizations, and one of the big ones is the National Hurricane Center. Right now, we're not really paying attention to the National Hurricane Center as much because it's not the hurricane season, right? Although we are looking forward to next year's hurricane season now as we start to get into late January and into early February. And here on the Outer Banks, kind of interested in what the hurricane forecasts are going to be for next year. I mean, we are kind of in a La Nina state in the Pacific right now, which tends to tamp down the wind shear here in the North Atlantic. And that can have an effect on cyclone formation. The lower the wind shear, the more likely cyclones are to form. And right now in the North Atlantic, we also have much warmer than normal ocean temperatures. And those ocean temperatures are, as we've been talking about at the OBX wave report a lot, big fuel for storms, and particularly for cyclones. Those hurricanes just love the warm weather, and they can suck it up to bomb out to these larger storms. So if you got that situation where the atmosphere is conducive and the ocean is conducive, you can have more hurricanes and more powerful hurricanes. But the NOAA El Nino and La Nina forecast shows a trend moving from La Nina to ENSO neutral to possibly El Nino later in the year. So how does that affect the hurricanes? And you can learn all that stuff at the National Hurricane Center, right? And they're experts in their research because they have decades and decades now under their belt looking at the science of hurricanes. And one of the things that they've been tweeting about recently is the, lo and behold, number of billion-dollar disasters report coming from NOAA earlier this month, including U.S. damage estimates for hurricanes in the multiple billions. For example, Ian was a $112 billion storm. Fiona was a $2.5 billion. Nicole was a $1.0 billion storm. And NOAA posting that the U.S. experienced $18 billion disasters in 2022, totaling more than $165 billion in damages. 122 separate billion-dollar disasters killed at least 5,000 people in the period of 2016 to 2022. And this is a part of NOAA's State of the Climate report, which I encourage you to take a look at. Very comprehensive State of the Climate report produced every year by NOAA. This is an infographic on billion-dollar disasters coming from the weather and the climate system. And there is certainly a link between weather and climate. Weather is your like kind of daily events in, as they occur, and climate is your weather averaged over about 30 years. But there's an interaction. There's fingerprints between the like climate system and weather events. So if your climate changes, weather can change as well. And NOAA is an expert organization on providing information about that and how the changing climate. Sorry, a little technical glitch there. And how the changing climate affects weather and how the weather can, extreme weather can be an indicator of a changing climate. So check out NOAA and the National Hurricane Center on hurricanes and climate and all the things. All right, so now we are going to go to one of my favorite climate scientists. I've got lots of favorite climate scientists, but Dr. Michael Mann, who is amazing, on point, feisty for the future, and amazing communicator on climate. Has written all these great books. Read them all. I need to take my advice and read his most recent, Our Fragile Moment. I have not read it yet, but I will read it and I will review it. And then maybe we'll do like a little review on the beach, maybe, and then go surfing or something like that. Or if I can remember well enough, I'll take you out in the water and do a review of Our Fragile Moment. I don't know. Maybe we can waterproof it. Who knows? This could be fun. But in any case, Dr. Michael Mann over at the Pennsylvania, University of Pennsylvania here. And what is he talking about? And he's talking about climate and politics and billionaires and clean energy. So let's get into it. Hold on. I want to follow Dr. Elizabeth Swain because I'm not, I need to be doing that. Okay. In any case, Dr. Michael Mann talking about Rep. Eric Swalwell and let's see what's there's some kind of smear and apparently yeah apparent so Rep Swalwell is countering some disinformation coming in from the political right, and I don't really know too much about this particular news, um, but apparently yeah, so Swalwell has definitely been the target of a lot of disinformation, and I can't keep up with it all. Some of it's coming from, you know, likely Russia sources, some of it's coming from likely Chinese sources, some of it's coming from right-wing extremists here in the US. And these days they tend to align more and more and more because authoritarians seem to run together these days in the early 21st century. If I said 20th century earlier, please forgive me. It is the 21st century. Let's go ahead and fact check that. But I'm going to have to go in and check out what Eric Swalwell was talking about because typically Dr. Michael Mann is really on point with these political things. He's promoting a Pennsylvania University Creative Writing Forum, which is cool because I like the creative writing. And apparently, proud to be hosting journalists, Society of Environment, for example, over at University of Pennsylvania in Philly in April 2024. Dr. Michael Mann promotes a lot of these events, which is fantastic. And then Dr. Michael Mann, major critic of Bill Gates and Bill Gates's climate communication. I myself personally am not a big fan of Bill Gates on climate. He's done a lot of good work elsewhere, but on climate, he seems to be kind of barking up the wrong tree. And I wonder if it's because he has an interest in things other than actual solutions for climate. I don't know. Or maybe he's just not listening to the climate scientists because he thinks he knows better. But in any case, Dr. Michael Mann stating here that Bill seems to want to try every possible ostensible climate solution except the one that counts the most, i.e., limiting fossil fuel driven carbon emissions. And here we go back to, you know, kind of the let's stop emitting carbon into the atmosphere and promote clean energy as a solution kind of thing, which is really kind of like, duh, you know, really easy, basic kind of thing to understand that supposedly really smart people don't understand. But in any case, yeah, Dr. Michael Mann on point here, calling out Bill Gates in his backing of an Australia startup targeting cow. Is this cow burps? Yep. Okay, here we go. Back to the cows. It's a cowspiracy, guys. back to the cows. I mean, I don't know. Newsflash, cows are not the main cause of climate change. It's the stuff you put in your car and then ignite. Okay, glad we got that figured out. Bill Gates, please listen. Okay. Dr. Michael Mann also talking about a recent ice shelf calving in Antarctica, which is news to me. Wow, this is freaky. Okay, so some useful scientific context from BAS News about the large iceberg that just calved from the Brunt ice shelf. And so I'm going to have to read this article now. This is very interesting. Let's see. Brunt ice shelf calve in Antarctica calves giant iceberg. A huge iceberg, 1,550 square kilometers, almost the size of London, has broken off the 150-meter thick Brunt ice shelf. Wow. Professor Dominic Hodgson, BSG glaciologist, this calving event has been expected and is part of the natural behavior of the Brunt ice shelf and is not linked to climate change. Okay, now this is interesting because sometimes the ice shelf calving events are due to melt due to climate change, and sometimes they're due to just natural ice shelf movement and progression. So this particular event is not one to link to climate crisis, although it is interesting that we have record low Antarctic sea ice right now as well. So, but the climate scientists are here to provide us with context and let us know when we should not light our hair on fire, and particularly in the case of the Brunt ice shelf, this is probably one of those things, as Dr. Michael Mann indicates. So, oh, and again, Dr. Michael Mann advising not to listen to Bill Gates on climate change. Mm, and then also talking about deploying present clean energy rather than like looking toward future silver bullets. Oh, and here we go back to Michael Mann on politics. And it's interesting because, okay, so now from the political standpoint, there is this link between, particularly in the United States, the right and anti-democracy forces on the right and anti-climate action forces. There's like this gnarly alliance between the two. And in particular, when it comes to Trumpists and Trumpism, the alliance, the obvious alliance between Trump and Russia coincides with a Russian petrostate interest in not deploying clean energy rapidly because Russia, for the most part, under Putin, has been pretty backwards when it comes to clean energy. But Dr. Michael Mann looking at the trends on Twitter, which can be kind of weird and annoying, but finding an interesting little blurb in the trends here, Trump and Russia and seditious conspiracy, which exactly, yeah, I think that's all we need to say about that. And then Dr. Michael Mann getting into politics here again, criticizing Tucker Carlson's crusade, retweeting Richie Torres criticizing Tucker Carlson's crusade against woke types, showing how pathologically petty the far right has become. This whole thing about woke is just silly to me. Woke is an adjective that describes someone who is alert to racism and injustice in society. So being woke is good. It's a virtue thing. And like shaming woke is kind of like, shaming people for saying, okay, you should treat people well, regardless of what they look like or, what culture they come from. Um, so now I don't know. Now sometimes folks even on the left are like, oh, woke like liberal latte liberals. Yeah, no. Woke is just like be nice to people. And it's one of those things that rose up from a benevolent culture here in the United States of pointing out people who harbor hate toward others and just basically asking them not to do that, to wake up to their own compassion, for example, and to not thrive on hate, which leads to violence and all the bad things. So, yeah. Um, and then Richie getting into this. Woke seems to be the catch-all adjective describing anything that offends the right-wing culture warriors like Tucker Carlson and Ron DeSantis. Of course, now that they've taken the term, they've turned it into like a curse word. Yeah, which is typical of the right, where they just take something that is good and try and defile it. So yeah, okay, right on, right on. Okay, let's see. Anything else from Dr. Michael Mann here that I want to take a look at? Oh, yes. Regarding the new fusion breakthrough, this is fascinating. So I'm not an expert on fusion, but the new fusion breakthrough does perhaps promise to provide us yet another arrow in our quiver to deal with the climate crisis. And here is Chris Cox stating that nuclear fusion is only 20 years away, Michael. A little bit of tongue-in-cheek sarcasm here, and Michael Mann stating a little bit of tongue-in-cheek sarcasm back. No, 10 years all anyway, always. And so yeah, so just a little bit into this thing here. We do have potentials in the future for breakthroughs for clean energy, and it could be nuclear fusion. It could be a new form of battery that is even better than the batteries we have now, and could be better solar panels, better wind turbines, all this stuff. But it's worth noting that right now, clean energy is a freaking miracle. The wind turbines are like one of the cheapest energy sources, or if not the cheapest energy source on the planet. Solar panels are close behind that. They're less expensive than fossil fuel, and they don't cause all the damage to your health and your water and all the other stuffs that cost a lot of other money that's not included in the actual cost at the pump of fossil fuels. And for those of you who are actually going to the pump, you understand now that, well, war abroad and disease can really ruin your budget by pumping up oil prices. And I don't experience that because I drive an electric vehicle. And I'm not saying that as, oh no, look at me, look at all the great things I did. No, I'm just saying, well, why be a pawn to like petrostates and oil oligarchs who are going to raid your purse every time there's a crisis? Yeah, so please enjoy the clean energy like I do, because not because of me, but because the good and the happy and the better. And so, yeah, we can master play these things now. We have solutions now. It's great that we might have a breakthrough or two in the future, but it's no reason to stop, and because there might be something better down the road. I mean, it's not like, okay, I'm not going to eat my chocolate ice cream now because I could have Rocky Road on Saturday. So yeah, let's do it. Let's have our chocolate ice cream and the clean energy solutions that we have now, and then maybe we can have Rocky Road on Saturday. Okay, well, I'm going to end it there with Dr. Michael Mann. Dr. Michael Mann, we love you. We love you. Keep doing all the good things. And yeah, I will read your book, your new book, the Our Fragile Moment. You know what? I'm going to have to order this on Amazon this week and put it on my reading list. And thank you all for joining me for this special edition of the OBX Wave Report. I know we talked for a long time, but it was fun. I love reading climate scientists talk. They are smart, they are quick, they are plucky, they're good folk, and please follow them, amplify them. If you don't follow me, follow them. and yeah, and then yeah, and maybe we can get a climate scientist to talk to us while surfing. That would just be amazing once we get our in the water wave reports going. So yeah, thank you for joining me for a climate science focused version of the OPX Wave Report, a special edition here on this Tuesday, the 24th of January. And please remember to do everything you can to help accelerate the clean energy transition, to listen to what the scientists are saying, because they They might know something or two or three or four, and to help defend our beautiful coastlines from the impacts of climate change driven by fossil fuel burning, because I mean, they just give us so much richness and joy, um, and natural wealth. They provide us with things we don't realize and that we won't realize until we lose them, if we lose them. So let's not. Let's just do the good things and have a prosperous future and listen to the folk that have our best interest at heart. So thank you for joining me again.